Venezuela continues to devolve into total and utter chaos. Arrests have now been made in Venezuela after soldiers tried to launch an uprising against President Nicolas Maduro. There was actually an attack launched against a military barracks in Valencia, Venezuela, and two attackers were killed, at least eight people arrested, according to President Maduro himself. There was a video released on social media which showed uniformed men saying that they were rising against what they described as a murderous tyranny. And this is all in the context of months of protests in Venezuela. The ruling Socialist Party's deputy leader called the attempted uprising a terrorist attack on Twitter. And there has been tons of blowback, not only to what's going on in Venezuela, but also even to my commentary recently from some who describe themselves as being on the left, defending Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez and criticizing me. And it's been very disturbing in the wake of this totally undemocratic process by which this election was triggered in Venezuela, an election whose details I will get into in a moment. I've received all sorts of messages from people saying, David, you're an anti-Maduro shill because you're Jewish. You're an anti-Venezuelan shill because you're Argentinian, and Argentinians hate South America. The Argentinians I meet seem to dislike the United States quite a bit. It's not South America that they dislike, but I guess that's anecdotal in both cases. David, you have your view about Venezuela because Venezuela is more brown, Argentina is more white, and you're part of that upper middle class Argentinian whatever that doesn't like brown people, which is laughable. The reason my family moved to the United States in 1989 is because we had no money in Argentina, because things were going so poorly in Argentina. I wonder if we had been part of the upper middle class in Argentina, I probably never would have come to the US, and you'd never be even writing me a message right now because I wouldn't have this program. And the way that the argumentation usually goes is, hey, listen, there was an election in Venezuela and Maduro supporters came out and they won the legislative elections. And of course, the reality is the elections were boycotted by the opposition because the elections were widely seen as fraudulent and invalid and completely rigged. So then the defenders, the apologists of the Maduro regime will say, well, if those opposition individuals had voted, then they might have won. Well, no. Number one, that doesn't appear to have been the case. Number two, there have been all sorts of bogus charges brought against opposition leaders to begin with. And lastly, there was never a vote about whether to have this legislative election. An actual democracy, which is not what Venezuela is, would say, hey, let's have a referendum. It's actually, referendum is not the right term, but let's have an initial vote to see whether we are going to have this legislative election. Instead, you have an election where no opposition candidates participated. The assembly has the power to rewrite the Constitution and could override the opposition-controlled National Assembly. And the key point for me is whatever criticism you have of American imperialism and the U.S. interest in oil in Venezuela, or whatever criticism, valid, of course, you have of ways in which the United States has meddled in other Latin American countries, whatever criticisms you have, Venezuela is not a democratic country, period. And it is wrong to support the Maduro regime, full stop. The government of Nicolas Maduro is not a legitimate democratic government. The United States wants oil, so the opposition is all astroturf and bad. We're talking about a non-democratic government. Maduro's government has purged voter ballots. They've disqualified the candidacies of opposition leaders in elections on totally bogus charges. They've jailed opposition leaders on made-up charges with no due process. They censor media and prop up state media. People don't even know what's happening in their country. Some people don't know. I want to be clear, qualify that with some. These are just a few of the things that the Maduro-Chavez governments have done. It should be painfully obvious to anybody who is an objective observer, but sadly, there are people on the left who love it. I've seen the most vile defenses from the left of Nicolas Maduro over the last 10 days, and it's truly disgusting. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to be in Argentina next week with my family. My family is all left-wing, but you've got the left that seems to sort of like the nonsense that's going on there. And then you've got the left that is critical of what is just authoritarianism under the guise of democratic socialism, which it's really not. And it really makes me sad when the left misses the forest for the trees, and that is exactly what is going on here. The video you just watched was made possible by support from you. Please go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show. You can make a pledge of as little as $1 per month, and every dollar helps to support the work that we're doing, particularly in light of the YouTube ad boycott, which has been really bad.